previously we had talked about autonomous driving use cases in AI and autonomous driving. Like, why did the car decide to go left versus right or go straight? There's the need to explain that decision in automotive, and then there's similarly a need at a high level concept perspective to explain why an AI system decided to give you an extra milligram of a certain drug potentially, or why it diagnosed an image a certain way for a certain disease in the imaging diagnostic. So these are all extremely important, that there is a path to understand how the decision is made and to validate and audit that decision being made by the AI models.
NXP Semiconductors' intelligent healthcare system solutions empower customers to navigate complexity, accelerate development, and unlock innovation. Together, we create next-generation healthcare solutions that enhance patient experiences and enable better healthcare outcomes. Learn more at nxp.com/healthcare. Hi, Ali. How are you today?
Hi, Junko. I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
Not too bad. I'd like to introduce our guest today. This episode is about the use of AI in healthcare, and we have a great guest today from NXP, Ali Ors, Global Director, AI Strategies and Technologies at NXP Semiconductors. I've known Ali for a long time, but for this purpose, for this episode, I would like Ali to explain what he does today at NXP, his role at NXP.
Great, of course. NXP Semiconductor is one of the leading processor vendors for embedded solutions globally. So in multiple markets, be it automotive, industrial use cases, IoT consumer use cases, and healthcare as well, which is our topic today. And within this large corporation that builds the processing capabilities for edge devices, I lead our global efforts in bringing both hardware and software enablement for AI use cases and AI workloads into these devices. So in terms of the processing that is specific for AI, like what we put into our chips, into our processor devices, into our silicon, as well as how we enable that for the developers and building out the software, bringing the applications to the market.
Yeah, I find the chip companies are in a very interesting place because you can talk about AI forever, different AI models and how the world is going to change by AI, but you actually bring solutions, enablement, both hardware and software, to the people who need to use AI in real devices, right? So you are at the crossroads. So in that vein, I just want you to take us from the top, actually. It's a vast field. I mentioned healthcare, but it's still the vast field. So tell us that in which particular segment of medical field AI is penetrating faster and further. Give us some examples, please.
Of course, we're seeing it. Of course, there is a lot of news, a lot of discussion happening in terms of how AI is used in diagnostics, or how AI is used in drug discovery, etc. These are bigger AI workloads than what would be suitable for the edge deployment. As I mentioned, NXP is providing processing power, processing capabilities, and devices for edge deployments very specifically. And within that also, we're focused in terms of AI on the inference, on the runtime decision making, things that are in real time, things that run on device, on not necessarily handheld devices, but on devices themselves versus running in the cloud or some large server room somewhere. Where we're seeing AI penetration in these edge deployments is around topics like personal care, where you have devices for patients, like let's say insulin pumps, in insulin monitoring devices, hearing aids, or other types of patient care devices that take samples or monitor a patient and provide some form of medical or pharmaceutical assistance to them. That's one of the fields where AI has been adopted and deployed. We're also seeing it in what's called patient care. So beyond personal care, patient care, so diagnostic and patient care devices as well. So using AI in both the deployment of solutions like EKGs, electrocardiograms, and certain
Hmm.
monitoring devices, looking at the signals that are being collected, and also assisting the healthcare practitioner themselves with AI in understanding how to use a device potentially, or how to better use a device, but also using the features of a given device with AI assistance.
Yeah, those are really good examples. The more I thought about it, the patient care sits at the core of healthcare, right? Some of the examples you mentioned, whether it's a hearing aids, it's your diabetes, any devices for diabetes patients, those things have been actually now they're loaded with a lot of technologies, and things are getting better and better. So, how would AI make it even better? Tell us the reasoning behind how AI would be helpful to these devices.
Yeah, I think that one of the main features that AI enables or makes better in these devices, especially from a software programmability perspective, is adaptability and customization to a user.
Ah,
Customization to a user and adaptability to the environment that that user is in. So if we take the example of hearing aids, a
yes,
lot of people, if they haven't experienced it or have seen it around their family sometimes, there's a misconception that hearing aids are about increasing the volume of the surrounding audio, and that
yeah,
if you increase the volume, you hear everything better. That's actually not the case. So hearing loss is not across the band sometimes. So hearing loss can happen on certain frequencies and is different for people, for a very from individual to individual. It changes. And also, when you imagine, like in our daily lives, ambient noise is critical. Even with hearing aids or without hearing aids, when people are communicating, we tend to hear better if we're actually seeing the speaker, if we understand who's seeing. So there's this connection of in our biology that we were able to understand and decipher better if we have a visual as well of the speaker, of the audio source itself. So when you imagine that you might be in an environment where you're not able to, like your hearing aids don't know where you're focused
right.
with your eyes. So all of this technology, the AI can be used in actually adapting to an environment, understanding what is ambient noise versus critical conversation that the user would be focusing on. So you're focusing on a specific audio. You're focusing on the voice of certain people in an environment where you might be in a very busy room, but you're talking to two of your friends, or you're having a
Right.
conversation with three colleagues. And it's that conversation that matters, not the table over at a restaurant. So these are the things where AI can actually adapt to the environment that you're in more easily, can detect the position of your head, the tilt of your head, like your gaze as well, and then feed that into the information of where the hearing device should be picking up or tuning into certain aspects. And going back as well onto how hearing loss sometimes is on certain bands, certain frequencies,
Mm.
and it's different. And so you have to make sure that you're not increasing the volume on every single frequency. You're kind of like augmenting the ones that have loss on them, whereas keeping the other ones the same. So this already happens when people are being fitted with hearing aids. There's a calibration aspect. You go in, you get the care, but that changes over time, and it could change
Ah,
daily for a user. Just like, I mean, I wear glasses. My eyesight is not the same when I wake up in the morning and I'm fresh versus I've been looking at a computer screen all day your eyesight kind of, your eyes get tired, your sensory abilities get tired and changes. So use of AI can actually allow for adaptation and customization, even on a very granular basis.
Interesting. So I think what you're saying at high level, the way I understood it is that AI can add context that where the medical device is being used by each person. But at the same time, this is such a basic question. Where is that AI processor located in hearing aids or in your glasses, and how would they actually understand the context? I mean, how do you make that happen though?
In the hearing aids, it's all audio signaling and positioning. So, but you do have accelerometers, you do have other sensors other than just microphones and other aspects of collecting sound as
Right.
well. Um, all of the processing is happening on that device. So it could be an implant. They're very small, very power efficient devices that need to be put in place. And power efficiency is critical here because that directly relates to the user experience. You cannot suddenly say, I'm out of battery, I'm going to pop my hearing aid out and charge it.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to swap out batteries. Like, you need to have a good use model
Yeah.
when these devices are being used, that the users they don't have anxiety over their battery levels.
Yeah. So hang on. The collecting sensory data, for example, let's stick to the
Mhm.
examples of hearing aids. Collecting sensory data is enough for AI to know where in the room that it needs to focus on? That seems like it needs some visual cue as well. I mean, I'm
You
just
can
quite
definitely
curious.
augment it. Yeah, I mean, you can
Yeah.
definitely augment it with a visual cue, but where you're situated in a room, which conversations you're having, which ones are closer to you,
Um,
etc., can be picked up by microphones. I mean, there's a lot of um, important information in just the levels of some of these signals. Like,
wow.
if I mean, when we look at just time series signaling, which is anything other than vision,
Yeah.
it's really about the amplitude sometimes
Oh,
of these signals coming in. So from that, you can actually decipher um, a lot of information. We might have had conversations on how we use AI. I want to kind of shift a bit slightly out of healthcare, but something very simple like a washing machine, and then detecting how much clothes somebody has put in a washing machine. People think that, oh well, you put a weight sensor somewhere and then it weighs the drum as you're loading it. Um, that adds an extra sensor that normally is not there sometimes.
right.
But you can also decipher from the voltage and current draw on the motor how much loading there is in that machine. So you don't actually need
Um,
another sensor. You just look at the voltage and current signals. And similar with audio, you're looking at the amplitudes and the signatures around the signals that are coming in to be able to say, this is ambient noise, it's always there, and there's some peaks and valleys to that ambient noise as well, but then there's the conversations that sit on top of it that are more specific, and there are different frequency bands for all these things. So there's the general noise behind you might have a different sit in a different frequency band than the actual conversations in the human speech or the music and the audio that you're trying to listen to. So you can draw an understanding of the context of the environment just from the audio signals that you have coming in through your microphone.
ah,
Also, with you have two hearing aids, so you have positional information as well. So you have your left and right.
okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. So be in both the
Yeah,
ears. Right.
yeah,
Right. Okay. So in other words, hearing aids, we say hearing aids, but it's the collecting a lot of data without adding additional sensor. That's what you're saying. And then by using AI, AI is kind of unearthing hidden information that
yeah.
the hearing aids are already collecting, and make an assumption or the probabilistic conclusion that therefore this person must be listening into this conversation. Is that how I should understand this,
Yeah,
Alan?
and that's a right way of thinking about it. I mean, but I also want to emphasize the hearing aids are not collecting data. They're
Okay,
they just have a microphone. They're listening to the environment at that
right.
point, right? So
Okay,
it's because when we get into collecting data, there's sometimes um, there is sensitivity around, oh, there's extra data that shouldn't be collected that's being collected. In a hearing aid, whatever you previously to hearing aids were hearing is what the hearing aid is getting. It can augment that and recover use and recover the user experience
yeah,
basically.
wow,
And then you get into other personal care devices like blood monitoring, blood sugar monitoring, insulin pumps, etc. Again, it's about that customization and the ability to adapt to the user at any given point in a more granular fashion of making sure that um, the the user is actually well taken care of.
yeah. No, that's a very good point. Now, you just corrected me. The hearing aids are not collecting data. Hearing aids are actually capturing data, but that's not uh, particularly stored any place, right? I mean, that
Correct.
was what you're implying. Now, let me ask you this. Um, I don't know whether hearing is a good examples on that, but when I talk to different people in different fields in regards to the domain-specific AI, what often came up was the importance of data. In order for AI to make a precise decision, or in order for AI to make an effective decision, the good data is really the foundation. Without good data, for example, in the industrial field, it's really hard to create like, okay, just put that edge AI processor in this production line and it'll figure it out. No, it's not. It's like it has to have a collected data in advance that machine can trust. So tell me in the medical field context that how important is the good data and how the data is being used? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll preface this by saying that in any AI field, in any industry, in any market segment, um, data is still a challenge. Honestly, I mean, one of the fields where maybe it's less of a challenge just because there's an abundance of data around it is detecting cats and dogs, which is not a very useful use case maybe, but it's around every other commercial use case or aspect of a market segment. Access to good data, I mean, and a large enough sampling of data is critical. So you need the positive examples and negative examples to be able to build out a robust enough um, solution to
Yeah.
this. You need to be able to test and validate what you're putting out. So having a sufficient and that word sufficient data is of course very specific to a use case. There's domain specific. You might need a lot more in certain aspects, and less might be sufficient in like building a simpler model of understanding anomalies. But then as the models get more critical and more complex, you need a lot more data to train it and have it be able to decipher between small nuances and differences. When we get into healthcare,
Yeah.
so healthcare as well, the data, the availability of data is critical. Healthcare has additional challenges around the privacy aspect.
Yeah.
A lot of our data is collected, is processed. I mean, we carry a mobile phone. We have apps on that phone, on those phones. A lot of our personal data is mined, let's say, but we do and have a lot more sensitivity around medical data, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to be, that private data to be misused or leveraged in certain ways. Or so whenever you're training healthcare systems or healthcare AI solutions, it's important to de-identify the data. So you're removing any identifiable aspects from the data
Ah,
when you're using for training. So that, and there are, this is critical because we had, examples and studies of systems where the AI finds loopholes in the data itself. Like you might be presenting it images saying detect some sort of chest anomaly, let's say in medical imaging, detect pneumonia in this set of images, and you train it with a lot of examples of where the patients had pneumonia and the patients didn't have pneumonia or had other diseases that were also lung diseases, and then the AI, unbeknownst to the researchers, was able to identify that the data set that was being used had a lot of children, had the juveniles that had a specific type of disease. And instead of focusing on the characteristics of the disease, it actually focused on smaller form factor, associated that with a certain type of disease, and said, well, if the size of the lungs are this, then this is the disease. So the results were coming in right, but the data was not balanced enough. So you have to be careful in how you're presenting the data to the AI, because it will find loopholes into making easier decisions at times. So that aspect of the data, the identification of the data. So there, like you maybe had other codes that identified a juvenile patient versus an adult patient that might have been leveraged. Just there's these little text in X-ray images that it might focus on the text instead of actually looking at the imaging and decode what is in that image when you don't notice it yourself. You expect it to be looking at the actual chest X-ray image, but the AI goes and focuses on the text at the bottom and says, oh, okay, I know, I've seen this 5 times already. This is this type of disease, just because from the patient code it might understand that this is a certain person, and that person has always had the label of having a certain type of health issue. So the quality of the data, the balance of it, the bias aspects, they're critical. I think that's critical for all AI systems. But in healthcare, you get into a lot of these identity and private data type of aspects. And bias and misdiagnostics can have quite drastic impacts. So it becomes more critical.
I certainly see that that could be a problem, but so is that where human beings are coming in? People often talk about guardrails for AI, right? And I'm just thinking about who is watching AI. AI, does it tell me about what the medical industry is trying to do in order to catch the certain bias or certain deficiency in the data that's being presented to the machine? I mean, can you tell me a little bit about how the humans are coming into play to correct some of the mistakes that the inadvertently AI had made because of the insufficient data, for example, or biased data?
We're seeing a lot of AI systems being deployed with a disclaimer saying does not replace a medical professional. Please don't use this to self-diagnose type of disclaimers to make sure that it's not being misused or leveraged beyond a certain point, so to remove the liability risk of the developers. When you get into these discussions around how the AI is making a decision or making a diagnostic of what it is leveraging, there are methods around interpretability and explainability of understanding what the model is looking at. So you can drill down, and there's efforts to use AI models where you can actually look at its decision process of why it made a certain decision. So this whole explainability and interpretability aspect becomes is more critical in the healthcare domain than maybe some of the other domains, because you want to make sure that as it's making decisions, that could be diagnostic, could be patient care, or personal care related. Why did it make that decision?
Right.
This is not very different from the high level context. Previously we had talked about autonomous driving use cases in AI and autonomous driving. Again, like why did the car decide to go left versus right or go straight? There's the need to explain that decision in automotive, and then there's similarly a need at a high level concept perspective to explain why an AI system decided to give you an extra milligram of a certain drug, potentially, or why it diagnosed an image a certain way for a certain disease in the imaging diagnostic or in the delivery of drugs. So these are all extremely important, that there is a path to understand how the decision is made and to validate and audit that decision being made by the AI models.
Interesting. So you're saying that this is fascinating. Using AI on top of AI. In other words, AI can ask really hard questions, drill down that the why did you make that decision in a more logical manner, I guess, to the original AI that made that decision. Is that what you're saying?
That's one way. So there are more deterministic ways, but it's really about having that flow, that decision flow, viewable or queryable. So that querying
Yeah.
can be done by another AI system, definitely, or could be done in more traditional human in the loop type of uses as well.
Right.
But that access needs to exist. You can't just say, "This is my AI model. This is a black box. You give the input, I give you the output. What it does in between, we don't know, but trust the output." Nobody's going to trust that output, especially in healthcare and medical, because even the developer is subjecting themselves to a lot of liability and risk in that sense. So you need to be able to understand how the AI model is making that decision. You need to be able to query it. You need to be able to audit it, and that's all part of this explainable and interpretable AI development flow.
That's a so important area because generally speaking, AI experts have told us, well, we can't really explain AI. I mean, explainability of AI has been brought up because it's not there yet. But what you're saying is that there's a whole new sort of field of AI that is asking AI the questions about why the AI made that decision so that it can literally explain their decision?
I mean, explainability of AI, when experts in the field actually say they can't explain it, don't know how to explain it, that's glossing over a lot of things when
Oh,
that's done, because
okay.
fundamentally AI models are math. So you're at a base science. There is an explanation. Now, exactly what the math algorithms and formulas have focused on to come to that output is what's critical. You can explain that. You just need to be able to observe it. And what I mean by observing is you need to be able to see the model, the path that it takes, what it weighs as more important versus less important in the signals that it's looking at. All of that is part of this explainable AI aspect. It's really about the ability to observe the decision steps that are part of an AI model, part of these algorithms in there. And like you said, you can query this with AI. So you can have AI on top of AI to help explain it or to actually extract the explanation more easily. Or you could have it with a human in the loop looking at the flow.
Wow. Is this something already being deployed or is it still in a research
Yes.
area, AI
No,
on
no,
top
this
of
is this
AI?
this is this is being deployed. So typically what happens, you know, with any nascent technology domain is like you run very fast and then you kind of have to slow down and explain how you got to where you are. So there's a bit of that activity. So there's a lot of energy and a lot of work going into the models, the use cases, and then there's the reality that sets in. For this to be truly deployable, it needs to have certain safety and security measures around it. It needs to have certain quality around it and determinism around it. And that's when you get into the real deployment stage of these models versus getting out of research and great big announcements and everybody is happy and impressed, to reality sets in of how do we make this robust enough that it is always
Wow.
coming up with the right answer or nearly almost coming up with the right answer versus only the right answers when it's given this specific set of inputs.
Oh, that's a very good point. All right. I'm going to switch gear a little bit because last
Sure.
time you and I talked, Ali, you mentioned something called MedGemma, and I wasn't aware of this. So, can you please explain to our audience what exactly MedGemma is?
MedGemma it's a collection of models specifically designed for medical use cases, released by Google DeepMind. And what's critical here is that it's released openly. Like there have been some models, both from Google and maybe others that are proprietary or meant for only researchers. MedGemma was, to my knowledge, the first openly available set of models designed for interpreting, understanding, and processing like medical text and images. So it creates this domain specific for medical uses and models specifically trained for the medical domain. And being open, it's about advancing the general field, medical artificial intelligence field, and research in that field. It's built on Google's Gemma 3 architecture, which is like an LLM model architecture, again, openly available from Google. And it has a lot of capabilities around, let's say, image classification, like we talked about X-rays, so radiology, pathology, um, image interpretation, and then generating reports from those images the same way a medical professional would. Then understanding medical texts, and then driving clinical reasoning. So if you get a text of a certain, so you can feed the reports from like the previous use cases I mentioned, like a radiology report, and then it's able to clinically reason around the data that's being presented in that radiology report or pathology report. Models that can do preclinical interviews and triaging, for example. So you can, instead of having a nurse when you go into to the emergency room that's doing your triaging, trying to understand why you're there, you could have an AI model that kind of does even the first step of that, and then maybe it's all about offloading the medical professionals potentially in terms of their workload and assisting in better patient experience and care.
This is fantastic. Do you see, I'm going a little off tangent here, but do you see something like, if there's a MedGemma, is there AutoGemma, or is there industrial Gemma? I mean, what do you see? Yeah.
So I think I won't say unique, what is important about MedGemma and what the Google DeepMind teams have made available is exactly that. It's specific to this domain. It is for the medical domain, because every domain sometimes has its own what we might refer as lingo, like its own language, its own specific language of saying something. And it's very sometimes easy for an insider to know if somebody is not an insider just because they're not using the right terms. And MedGemma would be using the right terms because it is built as a medical AI model. You do have other companies, exploring domains of, industrial automation, like factory automation, has its own set of features and maybe use cases that can be deployed. So every domain does benefit from specialization, where models like foundational models and LLMs with generative AI came into play. Initially, it was about this very large model that had a very wide scope, which was very interesting. But now, as you get into deployment of these large models into more edge devices, you cannot run a trillion parameter model on an edge device. You can't run it even on a single very powerful computer. Like it is something that ends up being specific to a cluster of servers and cloud space, etc. But to make the experiences available in real time on edge devices, the models have to be smaller and to still be capable while having less compute and less memory resources to run on. They need to be tuned to the domain.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I had this discussion with research scientists at the AI Sweden the other day, and we were talking about the use of AI in automotive in that context. But he talked about that domain experts in automotive industry can no longer sit on the sideline to see what big hyperscalers like I don't know, Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, what they do, waiting for them to come up with the new AI models. I think this is the time that domain experts need to get involved and develop what they really need for the specific domain that they are in, because they are the ones who have lived through working in this domain. They probably know far more than what is needed, but also they are sitting on a gold mine of data that their industry or their company or their application built. And I was wondering if we can actually say the same thing for the medical domain. What do you think, Allie?
Yes, I think it's maybe even more relevant to the medical domain in a sense. In the automotive domain, I can see, like you mentioned, that domain experts are sitting on a gold mine or sitting on a pile of gold because they've collected data. Um, it's important to know that not all data collected is gold. So if you haven't collected it, sometimes with specific intent, like if you haven't had a data science intent around data collected, it might not be worthwhile data to create an AI model out of. So the quantity of data is less important than the quality or the right kind of data in most AI models. But of course, the higher quantity of high quality data you have, the better your life will be in trying to create models and trying to create solutions around that. In medical domain as well, like having this, we talked about MedGemma, like a specific domain models, having domain specific data to fine tune the models is critical. So the automotive sector and the entities like the OEMs, the tier ones, any provider in that system that has data around a specific use case, that is very valuable, and that can be used to create a brand new model from scratch. This can be a CNN model or a large language model or vision language model, like a generative AI transformer model with that data, or it can be used to tune an existing highly capable model to that specific domain. And the tuning can be almost a retraining step, or can be other steps that there's methods like retrieval augmented generation. You can leverage data to actually bring context to the use case without modifying the base model, which becomes important in a lot of areas, especially when you get into what we discussed, interpretability, explainability, because those all lead into this need to regulate and understand what a model is doing. And the understanding of what the model is doing is also around regulations or regulatory bodies trying to put infrastructure and around the quality as well as the safety of the population. So if you have a model that has gone through and been approved,
yeah,
you don't want to modify that model just because you have your own data. Like you have specific data, but the model is already approved. So there are techniques like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, to actually bring in context, bring in customization without modifying the base model, and so you're not affecting your regulatory approvals around that model.
Yeah. All right. Well, we covered a lot of grounds, a lot more than I had originally have in mind. But let me close the session with this one question, Allie. If you are given a magic wand, or in the medical field, the use of medical field could be enormously improved if you had XYZ. Can you tell me what's on your wish list that still needs to be actually brought to the world to make AI truly effective in the medical field?
I mean, you mentioned a magical wand, so I'd like to magically solve around the adoption aspect, because a lot of these technologies exist. What they need is to mature, and for technology to mature, it needs to get deployed. And in domains like healthcare, part of the challenge is, understandably, that there's a lot of scrutiny and a lot of assessment and carefulness before deploying something that could have implications around the health of individuals. But we still need these technologies to be adopted so that they can mature in the field. So accelerating that adoption rate, accelerating the collaboration between the AI solution providers, the device developers like ourselves, and the data scientists that work on these domains is critical. So solving for the risk and liability aspect, while increasing adoption. I think from the hardware capability and the software enablement, as NXP, we're doing our part. We're really pushing hard in making sure that there are devices that do solve within the power and compute constraints for these types of these use cases, like being able to put processing power into the personal care devices, into the patient care devices directly, helping both the patients and the individual users, as well as the practitioners, the healthcare practitioners. The technology is there. We're also getting into trying to facilitate the whole regulatory aspects of making sure that our hardware and software is auditable in terms of solving for this regulatory explainability aspect, and trying to remove all the friction points. And the magical wand would come in into accelerating that adoption, because then things, as they mature, as they get adopted, they mature, and it accelerates into the market, into people's lives.
All right. Very good. That we will look for the magic wand for you,
Yeah.
Ali. All right. Well, thanks for coming to the show. You actually
Thanks a
really
lot, Junko.
there's a lot of ground, and I really learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
NXP Semiconductors' intelligent healthcare system solutions empower customers to navigate complexity, accelerate development, and unlock innovation. Together, we create next-generation healthcare solutions that enhance patient experiences and enable better healthcare outcomes. Learn more at nxp.com/healthcare.